everybody, Coach Abel here, and I'm coming at you with another quick webinar talking about fat equals lazy. So let me ask you something here. Are you fat and lazy, or do you know someone who's fat and lazy? I want to start off with a story first that sort of sparked this whole desire to do this particular video. I'm consulting the other day with another online coach who hired me for a consult. And as we're talking, he says offhand, he says, "Oh, Coach, I took a page out of your book the other day. I have a new client who's got 80 or 90 pounds to lose. And I said to her, she needs to get off her fat, lazy ass and get real about getting real." And I stopped right there and said, whoa, 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 slow down there, cowboy. For one, I've never talked to an overweight client or potential client that way. I've never said to them to get off their lazy ass or called them lazy. Secondly, I said to him, what evidence do you have that this client is lazy if they're a new client? And his answer was, well, she's fat. And that logic doesn't compute, and it made me furious. You might as well say that fat equals stupid, or the flip side, therefore, someone lean must be really, really smart. These common stereotypes just refuse to die, and we know them all through society. Dumb blondes, dumb jocks, things like that. Listen, in my bodybuilding days, I knew many stereotypical bodybuilder types who had million-dollar bodies but 5-cent brains. That doesn't mean I labeled them all that way. So can you see the false narrative conclusions here? And that's why I want to do this particular short webinar video to get at the heart of the matter. Fat equals lazy. It's been suggested that obesity is the result of just being lazy and unmotivated. And this bias is particularly prevalent in the fitness industry. And that's something that doesn't seem to go away. There seems to be a prejudice against people outside of the fitness industry that if they don't look the type, then they're not the type, and then therefore they're excluded. So this perception bias has been so strong that even various research journals in the obesity arena looked into it and felt compelled to comment. So what is the truth here? Well, I'm going to get to the bottom of this and why it's so important to understand. First of all, let's look at some obesity charts, both from North America or the US and around the globe. And you can just do a Google Images and look at obesity rates through the years or whatever you want. And you can see pretty similar rates of obesity. So we can see that obesity trend begins in the mid to late 1970s. And this occurs on a global scale in prosperous and developed nations. And if we look at these graphs, that obesity levels rise steadily since the 70s and across the globe, and are even worse now than they ever were, then the hypothesis that fat equals lazy and unmotivated certainly makes no sense. Because think about it, for this argument to be true, then this would mean that every single demographic in developed nations, like age, gender, culture, they somehow all suddenly and simultaneously at the exact same time experienced massive laziness and apathy at the very same time. There was just suddenly this big global boom for lack of self-control and self-discipline and effort in interest in weight control. So you can see how ridiculous that sounds when you look at it on a macro level across the world and across the globe on the rising levels of obesity. So instead of making ridiculous, specious claims that suddenly there was a global decline in individual character, how about looking at many ways environment has impacted weight via food choices, availability, taste, etc. Now, I've talked about these issues in many of my videos and books. Beyond Metabolism, my book, for instance, in particular, I talk about all these issues. The distinction that explains the obesity epidemic is not that there was some kind of massive change in our collective character, but there was a massive change in our collective life experience. I'm going to put that up on the screen for you to look at again. The distinction that explains the obesity epidemic is not that there was some kind of massive change in our collective character, but there was a massive change in our collective life experience. In particular, the ease, availability, and affordability of hyper-palatable crap food. CRAP is an acronym meaning calorie rich and processed, and how the food industries want to protect and disguise and deflect away from how these foods will make someone addicted and fat and easy to put on weight. So the equation, fat equals lazy, needs to be put in its proper place, which is that it's absolutely ridiculous. Not only does it lack context, there is no context for it. So here is what I know from coaching thousands of people over the last 5 decades that I can tell you from experience without having to look at literature or research or whatever. My obese clients were no less motivated or lazy than my other clients, and they were about the same level in terms of the percentage of those who were really serious about physique transformation and those who were not serious and just told themselves they were in their own heads. That had no particular bias in terms of whether or not someone was overweight. And here are just a few, and I can tell you also that a lot of the times it's people who have never had a weight problem or a food issue who are the laziest because they've never had to think about it before. And I'll get to that in a minute as well. But here's what I want to put up on the screen for you to consider. Here are just a few of my most awesome, successful weight loss transformation clients from recent years. And I'm just going to put a few up there. There's way more, and maybe we can get them all on the screen at the same time. But here's just a few before and after pics of people who went from obese, massively overweight, to in shape and staying that way. And I'll give you just a second to look at these pictures as well as we put them up on the screen. So I want you to consider this when you're considering or addressing whether or not you, in particular, have a bias that fat equals lazy. Are we to assume then that before their weight loss, these folks that I just put on the screen were just lazy and unmotivated, and then suddenly, boom, major motivation kicked in for some reason, and they just stopped being lazy? That is ridiculous, and that is a circular argument. So many of my clients were not lazy at all even before they lost the weight. They just didn't have the right key to unlock the right door to the right path for their particular transformation. In fact, so many overweight clients that I had to be even more motivated and than less obese clients, because they usually had to achieve weight loss all on their own. What do I mean by that? I mean that so many overweight people get no credit and no support from other people in their life during their weight loss journey, especially in the early phases when support is so necessary. What is frustrating to me as a coach is that I have had dozens of overweight clients who worked way harder and were way more disciplined and more consistent than the genetic elite clients I trained who required far less sustained efforts and discipline in order to look good, yet they got all the eyeballs and the credit, wow, you look great kind of thing. Now, I should also point out here that I myself have been accused of fat shaming because I make very real discussions about the consequences of being very overweight and, of course, how to solve this issue for people who are serious about doing so. And let's get that straight, too. There are serious health risks to being overweight and serious limitations of quality of life experience as well. And those are the kind of things that I talk about and go into detail about. But saying that fat equals lazy and equating being fat as being a character flaw, that's just a cop-out and an easy go-to for trainers and diet gurus out there. And those who do go there clearly do not understand how and why obesity became a global phenomenon. And without that understanding, then the blame game, shame game takes over. And that helps nobody. that's my rant. Tell me where I'm wrong below. Tell me how I screwed it up. By all means, please let me know your comments and opinions. But fat equals lazy is an absolutely ridiculous stereotype along the lines of dumb bonds and dumb jocks and muscle heads and all the rest of it. So if you want to get real about getting real, then educate yourself on the causes of obesity, the trends of obesity over the years that keep going up, and why that may be so. It's not a character flaw. It has everything to do with environmental and industrial influences. Some of you will get it, some of you will not. I hope you will appreciate it, but telling people who are overweight that they're lazy and unmotivated is an absolutely ridiculous argument. Shame on those who do that. I'll see you all in the next video. Please like, subscribe, all that stuff. Leave your comments below and I'll be happy to address them. See you later.